Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist at Nutrient Ag Solutions, and I want to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Now, clearly this is not from North Carolina, but I at least want to show you some of the impacts of the blizzard we had at the end of last week and over the weekend in parts of the North Central Plains. This picture was sent into the Grand Forks, North Dakota National Weather Service office by Corey, and it just shows you some of the drifts that we had in this area. For those of you that are growing some corn and soybeans in the Carolinas, what I want you to understand is that the snow that fell in this area, which ranged between 6 and 36 inches, fell on a crop that was barely harvested, which means we're going to see a lot of damage out of this particular system once the snow begins to melt, and it will likely melt later on this week. We did have widespread frost across much of the United States. Just to keep you more informed about what was happening around the rest of the country here, this is looking early Saturday morning, probably our coldest morning of this previous system. We can see we got frost all the way down in parts of Texas, stretching over into the eastern Corn Belt. So overall, this was a pretty powerful system that brought an end to the growing season throughout the midsection of the United States. Now, when we look at the total accumulated precipitation over the weekend, I want you to see a couple of things. First of all, starting off in the Carolinas, the rain that we did get in the overnight hours did, throughout parts of the Carolinas, bring in some locations better than 1/4 of an inch, some places getting up closer to an inch of rainfall. So some locally heavier rain across a drier area. But overall picture from the weekend, I just want to put one last point on this. The amount of rainfall that happened up here, snowfall that happened here in North and South Dakota, well, is basically the equivalent of getting about a 2.5 to 3 inch rainfall event. And what I mean by that is that as that snow melts, remember that it's going to continue to cause problems with harvesting a crop in the Dakotas. So just something to keep an eye out on as we move forward in this forecast. Well, the big question is, are we going to be changing our overall water picture here in the Carolinas? Because looking over the last 14 days, now this was through Sunday morning, so this doesn't include the rainfall we got in the overnight hours this morning, but this shows you through Sunday morning what kind of rainfall we've had over the last 2 weeks. And we've got parts of the Carolinas that have been quite dry. In fact, some locations not measuring any precipitation, while parts of the central United States have had up to 5 times the normal rainfall. Now let's put this in a broader perspective. I'm going to show you some new maps that just emerged last week. These are the statewide precipitation ranks maps. So we have 125 years worth of consistent records across the United States. And right now you can see that parts of the southeast, well, all those ones you see in those states, those were the record driest Septembers that we've had since, well, the last 125 years. But you look there in parts of the Carolinas, say 16 and 25, and say, well, why weren't we as dry as our neighbors? Well, a lot of that was due to Hurricane Dorian. Remember, Dorian came right up the coast like this and soaked this area, bringing up the totals on precipitation there. So outside of that one event, though, it was very, very dry. And this map tells a lot about the flow pattern that we saw throughout the month of September, which has continued now into the month of October. So here's the thing we need to be discussing. This is from our national blended model. So again, this combines the GFS, several of the other models we run here in the United States, and the European and its ensemble. And when we put these maps together, I'll just let you know the national blended model often paints kind of the high-end scenario every time. In other words, it's giving us the most we could possibly get. And this is just looking out through the day on Friday. And what I want to talk about is more about the precipitation pattern. Because after last night's rainfall, we do need to be watching a system that is coming through the Central Plains that will be eventually going up into the northeast and producing a large nor'easter. At the same time that that's occurring, the low pressure system that was here that's now slowly moving on off to the kind of near the border of Quebec and Ontario, it will leave a frontal boundary sitting in through this area, such that midweek we need to be watching out for some heavier rainfall through the Carolinas, but also some desperately needed rainfall down here from Georgia all the way over to eastern Texas. Okay. After that, it's a big system coming out on like the 20th through the 22nd that is going to set its sights on the central United States. That's going to impact us over in the East Coast as well. Let's get to all of it by giving a quick week 1, week 2 summary, okay? So week 1, GFS ensemble here, picking up on the development of that nor'easter and the lingering boundary in through this area. So when we think about the next 5 days especially, we'll be wetter as we get closer to the coast and drier toward the interior. You're going to see that in a few moments. But by the time week 2 gets here, the atmosphere sets itself up so that there's a deep trough that takes aim here on Alaska and into British Columbia. A ridge builds into the west, and as a consequence, a trough builds in here. and that is going to keep this entire corridor unsettled with weather as we get into week 2. So we need to get into those details here in a few moments. So let's just take a look. This was the rain late in the evening last night into the overnight hours, so finally moved offshore. And we are going to see later on, right about Tuesday afternoon and evening, getting into Wednesday morning, that's our next big shot at getting some precipitation. Now, what's the cause of this? Well, let's just get ourselves to Tuesday here. This is early Tuesday morning. This boundary you see right in through here on which all this rainfall is happening, turns out the front actually goes off my image and all the way up into the low. That was the blizzard over the weekend. So a lot of precipitation running parallel to the boundary here, the front, which means it's going to be very heavy rainfall in that location. But it's stalled out to the south of North Carolina, which means we're going to get through the start of this week relatively dry. Now, what we're waiting on is this low pressure system to take shape in the Midwest such that its frontal boundary here meets up with the front to the south, and the two of them push into the northeast by Tuesday night. See it there? Such that by Wednesday morning, there's where our chances for our best chances for some heavy rainfall move in. So really it's Wednesday morning throughout the day on Wednesday and getting into Thursday that we're going to be paying attention to heavier rainfall here across the Carolinas. Again, more focused on the eastern parts of the Carolinas than the west. So let's switch over and show you our long-range models to pick up on this pattern from Wednesday morning on. So here it is, 7 a.m. Wednesday, getting you throughout the day on Wednesday into Wednesday evening. So there it is. That's our best chance at midweek rainfall. And I'll show you some of those precipitation totals in a moment. Now, high pressure builds in behind this, so we finish off the week on a drier note. But what I want you to be watching is what's coming into the Pacific Northwest, because that storm system starts to take shape in the middle part of the United States by the time we get to the 19th. It doesn't look like much is going on here, but it is. Now, what's the setup? Do you see this area of higher pressure? That's going to keep us dry through much of the weekend. But behind this, we're pumping in moisture into the midsection of the country. And watch this storm system show up here by Sunday afternoon and evening, taking full form by Monday morning. And nothing is keeping this one from going toward the northeast, which means we'll eventually get some of that heavier rainfall here over to the Carolinas as we progress through the beginning of next week. So again, Monday night through Tuesday into Wednesday. So we need to be on the lookout for a very active start to next week. And of course, we'll have more details on this next week in our next video, but that's what we're watching at that particular point. It's amazing. Do you remember me talking in last week's video about the super typhoon Hagibis, who over the weekend hit Japan? This storm system you just saw go through there, that one right there is the remnants of Hagibis. Isn't that amazing to see the atmosphere so connected in that way, bringing rainfall to us here in the Carolinas 15 days later? I think it's incredible to see that. Now, there is a little bit of uncertainty in that forecast, and so what I want to show you here is the difference between the operational GFS, which is what you just saw, and the European model. The GFS wants to take the low like this, and the European model wants to take the low much farther to the north. And the differences between those two tracks are maybe better seen in these images. So what you're looking at here is over the next 5 days, so this is just through the end of the week, total accumulated precipitation. Now, some of what you see right in through here was falling early this morning because this model was initialized at 0Z today. So that was basically late last night. So that's some of the rainfall early this morning. Outside of that, we do get this chance by midweek to be bringing in rainfall totals in here that could add another 3/4 of an inch to maybe over an inch in some of the areas of heavier precipitation. Outside of that, much of western North Carolina on the drier side with maybe some enhanced lift over the Appalachian Mountains. But look at what happens when I add to this the next 5 days. We'll just put a +5 there. So this takes us all the way up to day 10, a 240-hour forecast. Because of that next system that comes through, we do have the potential for picking up quite a bit more rainfall. And this would be welcomed. Despite our harvest efforts, we need some precipitation, and this would be certainly helping us get rid of some of the drought we have across the state of North and South Carolina. Now, what's the difference here? Well, let me take these drawings off, and I'm going to show you the exact same thing from the GFS model. So this is the European, this is the GFS. The GFS is a bit of a drier model. I'll keep toggling back and forth here. Look at the left image first. This is through the next 5 days. So the GFS here, you see in interior North Carolina bringing in a little bit smaller rainfall amounts. And because of the trajectory difference in the storm system that it's currently forecasting for early next week, it's drier overall across North Carolina throughout the day 10 time period. But good news is we'll have another forecast video that come out next Monday that will detail this system and how much rainfall we get. What I'm asking you to do right now is just to keep a very, very close eye on it. So you got some rain coming in midweek this week, and then you're going to need to watch this system for early next week. On either side of that, things are relatively dry. Now, take a look at this flow pattern. Are you ready? This is the trough that went barreling through, producing the blizzard. Now, we're going to watch it over the next couple of days just transition slowly into, Quebec. Just sits there, all right? But watch the system that comes behind it right here. This is the kicker. And that's the one that's going to sweep through and bring us our best chances midweek for precipitation in the Carolinas. Now, after that system moves on out, Big Ridge builds in the middle part of the country. We're on the back side of a trough, which is where higher pressure builds in. And that's why the end of the week is going to be a drier bias. But you see this big blue trough that's coming right here into the western United States? That is the result of Hagibis perturbing the flow. And just like we've talked about so much this year, whenever we build in this trough into this area and have a ridge running up the eastern part of the United States, it's always in between the two that we get the most active weather. So this is the region right in through here that I'm most concerned about as we press into early next week, okay? Now I want to give you one last thing to think about after this goes through. We're going to see that by the time we get toward the 24th, 25th, 26th of the month, that the jet stream gets itself into a configuration such that there's broader ridging here across the west and a broader trough over the east. Now, why I want you to pay close attention to this pattern is there are some long-range forecasting ideas at this point that this may be a pattern we favor going into winter, in fact, for quite a bit of winter. At the same time, we may be watching a strong subtropical jet come in like this. And all I'm trying to say is that could keep this area of the country quite active with storm track. So it's just a preliminary idea for our early winter, but something I want you to be on the lookout for, because that pattern may be one we see quite a bit. It's one that could carry some interesting consequences for the beginning of our winter. Okay, temperature patterns here as we get toward the end of this video. Over the next 5 days, we have two troughs moving through, so that's why we see the near average to cooler than average bias in the eastern half of the United States. And this, of course, by the way, just to let you know, that's from the snow cover. But look at what happens days 6 through 10. This is where we start to build our warmth back up in the Carolinas here as the deeper trough moves in out west and we build another ridge over the southeast. So the storm track comes right in through the middle, and that's what's going to keep this area, again, very active, but certainly going back on the warmer side of things. But as you saw, the broader trough then finally sweeps on through. So we could be looking out toward the end of the month at a cooler time period to finish up while the west coast warms back up. So that's some perspective for you for the Carolinas as we move through the next 15 days on not only what your temperature patterns are going to be doing, but what the rest of the country will be seeing as well. This is very typical of October in terms of having an active pattern. Now, what's not typical of October right now is a few things. One is Melissa. Melissa, remember, went right in through here as an post-tropical, almost extra-tropical system with a cold core, but then had over the weekend a lot of very deep thunderstorms built into the middle of it, which then warmed the core up, making it now back to a tropical storm. This will be very interesting. While it has no impact on the Carolinas, to see the development of a storm system off the west coast of Africa this late in the season is quite impressive. Keep an eye on this. I'm not too concerned about it at this point. I'm more concerned about the moisture that will be coming from the tropical convection in the Bay of Campeche that may be used here in the United States as one of these big low pressure systems sweeps through and draws that moisture into it. That could be impactful for the Carolinas. So I'm not saying any major landfalling hurricanes anytime soon coming toward us. Nothing. Nope, none of that. It's just the interplay between the tropics and the flow of the jet stream we need to be paying attention to. I'll finish up with a quick discussion about South America, since we of course grow corn and soybeans and cotton in the Carolinas, and this is important to know. CONAB released a report on Thursday basically summing up that they're anticipating 120.3 million metric tons. That would be their biggest crop. It's up 4.7% on last year in terms of soybeans. Corn is actually down 1.7% to 98.3 million metric ton. Part of that is due to the fact that we've had a late start to the season. Now, this these two maps, on the left I have the GFS ensemble, and on the right I have the European ensemble, looking at the next 15 days of precipitation. We are still in longer-term drought in Mato Grosso, which is our major corn, soybean, and cotton-producing state. You can see we're still in a drought. We should have accumulated about 4 inches of rainfall. We're at about 3.5 inches so far. But that's certainly coming up in that region. Where it has been very dry, well, let's just go over here to Bahia, Tocantins, and Goiás. They are still in drought conditions over here, so things are majorly delayed in that section of Brazil, so eastern Brazil. And when we think about southern Brazil, let's just come down here and take a look. Southern Brazil still in drought, still in deficit, but some recent big rainfall event is helping out Paraná, Rio Grande do Sul pick up on some precip, and they're forecast to get quite a bit more. So that is just some perspective on this overall pattern. I'll finish up with one last thing I want to show you here, and that is what our current sea surface temperature anomalies look like. What we need to be thinking about for winter is the fact that this corridor recently has warmed up. So with this major positive Indian Ocean dipole event sending wind this way, building up warm water here, it's also sent a wind this way, building up warmer water there. And that has eroded away the cooler tongue that we did see emerging in this area, which made us look as though a La Nina were going to form. What I'm concerned about is the jet stream may feature a pattern like this throughout much of winter. All right, so let's just keep an eye on it together as we progress throughout the weeks here, going through fall and into early winter. This is just some early ideas. You saw in last week's video what we were thinking about in terms of precipitation. This is supportive of that, okay? So I'll go ahead and wrap up this forecast video right here. We Nutrient Ag Solutions and at the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina, thank you for your attention. Have a great week, and we will talk to you again soon. Thank you.